that has captivated much of the world's attention is finally set to take place. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will address the U.S. Congress this hour, a decision which has led to a fierce backlash from the White House and has many analysts wondering whether relations between Washington and Jerusalem have hit a new low. Netanyahu's speech will focus on Iran's nuclear program less than 1 month before a deadline for a framework agreement between the P5+1 and Tehran. And joining me to discuss the issue are I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shaleb and Brendan Friedman of the Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University. Thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Good evening.
But before we delve further into the issue, I-24 News reporter Charles Biblazer provides a recap of the lead-up to today's speech and the tensions it has caused.
Thank you.
It's the speech that will finally be heard round the world. But according to many, the Israeli premier's congressional address risks backfiring. Whereas the focus was supposed to be the Iranian nuclear threat, a weeks-long back-and-forth war of words has plunged U.S.-Israel relations into crisis and prompted a major White House offensive against Netanyahu.
He was extremely outspoken about how bad the interim agreement was, during which time he called it the deal of the century for Iran, even though it has clearly stopped Iran's program, and more importantly, he has decided it would be good to continue it. He may have a judgment that just may not be correct here.
What has happened over the last several weeks, by virtue of the invitation that was issued by the Speaker, is that on both sides there has now been injected a degree of partisanship, which is not only unfortunate, I think it's destructive of the fabric of the relationship.
All the while, Israel's prime minister has remained defiant, viewing his speech as an historic event, a duty on behalf of the Jewish people.
As the Israeli Prime Minister, it is my duty to guarantee the nation's security, and that's why we oppose the pending agreement between Iran and the P5+1 nations, which could endanger the very existence of Israel.
Yesterday, Israel's leader was in his element, received at the annual AIPAC conference with open arms as the messenger he claims to be. But it remains to be seen whether today's reception will in any way be comparable, with many American lawmakers having chosen to boycott the address. More important, however, is whether Netanyahu's words will have their intended effect: to sway U.S. legislators as world powers edge closer to forging what he describes as a bad deal with Iran.
And we're less than 15 minutes away from the Israeli premier taking the stage. But before we go to today's main event, Tal, a lot of the talk leading up to this was about Israeli-U.S. relations and where have they gone because of this speech. But yesterday at AIPAC, we saw a lot of talk, and Brendan, you as well, a lot of talk about the relationship between the two and that it will always be strong. Susan Rice said, they both came out to protect this. Is this the real show, or is it just the show for the pro-Israel lobby?
Well, I don't think it's a show for the pro-Israel lobby. There was an attempt by both sides, both by Netanyahu and by Obama and Rice, to try and lower down the tensions, at least for the outside. Netanyahu gave quite a peaceful and conciliatory speech. It's true, he did not confront or attack Obama directly, and he stressed that he does not respect Obama. At the same time, Obama gave an interview yesterday to Reuters, which one would define as quite weak. It wasn't very strong, at least not against Netanyahu. Both Rice, National Security Advisor Rice, and Obama seem to be keen on explaining why they think the deal emerging between the six world powers and Iran is a good deal, trying to refute Netanyahu's claims. But that was just on camera. Behind the scenes, there was still tensions until the last minute, because on the way to Washington, Netanyahu briefed reporters on the plane saying that he intends to reveal new
information, and now we heard that
details from the negotiations.
Last night, also from Press Secretary Josh Earnest and from Susan Rice herself, warning him that could be a betrayal of trust if he does this. Did he make last-minute changes last night?
Well, apparently, yes. We hear from Washington that Netanyahu did moderate his speech slightly, and he will refrain from giving any harsh comments, or at least attacking Netanyahu attacking Obama, with too harsh punchlines. He will keep it subtle, or at least that's what his people are briefing. But nevertheless, it's going to be a very interesting venue. It's a full House, even though we have more than 50 Democrat senators that are boycotting the speech. speech. It's a full House, and he has been welcomed quite warmly by many Republican senators in the past hour who have been on social media tweeting. So we might even get standing ovations, which of course is good for Netanyahu. This is his cause. This is the speech of his lifetime, and we can definitely expect he'll be giving quite a show.
And as you said, it's a full House, and we're already getting live images of people arriving at the chambers for Netanyahu's speech. As 50 members of the Democratic Party, though, will be missing. But from the ones that are arriving, should we expect a different show than the harsh words that we've been hearing from both sides of from Israelis and also the Democrats over the past couple of weeks?
If I were the Prime Minister, you know, he doesn't really have to introduce new information in order to make his point. I think if he refers to the undeclared enrichment site or research and development site that was revealed by the Iranian opposition in exile last week and says, hey, look, this deal doesn't take into account undeclared facilities, facilities that may be housed in military sites. And if he uses that as a point of emphasis, I think he can leverage that issue into the fact that this deal has big holes in it. And he can do it in a way without sort of, you know, banging his fist on the table and embarrassing the U.S. president. And I think if some degree of subtlety and nuance will be required in this speech, it remains a question mark if we'll see it. But I think the points are there for him to make if he chooses to make them. The question is how he's going to make them, and we'll have to wait and see. Yesterday,
he literally put on a show, got a standing ovation. Should we expect the same reaction from today's crowd?
You know, I think that we'll see what we typically see, which is, you know, some people very enthusiastic and others who are, I guess, playing it low key.
And you said made changes to his speech last night. You're saying he doesn't have to make these harsh statements. What should we expect from this speech?
Well, I think we should expect the Prime Minister to make his case. And I think his case is, look, this deal is not going to keep Israel secure in the medium to long term, and maybe even not in the short term.
The hall is also filled with Netanyahu supporters. We have many friends there, especially, just to note a few of them, American billionaire Sheldon Adelson, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, Nobel Prize laureate Elie Wiesel. These are all people who came there to support Netanyahu. So it is clear that he has support of one side of the House. The question is about the other side of the House. The White House, of course, will not be watching the speech. They made a point out of making a point out of it to stress that the president will be having a conference call at the time of the speech with European leaders.
For a couple of weeks now, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Vice President Joe Biden will not be present. They're even out of the country. And like you just said, already this morning, we heard that President Barack Obama is going to be on a live chat with European leaders. Is that another smack in the face to Netanyahu?
Well, if you ask the administration and if you ask American officials, this is not a smack in the face. This is just the way they would conduct any politician who, the way they would treat any politician that would arrive in Washington to such a controversial speech 2 weeks before the elections. And that is, of course, something we must keep in mind all the time when we listen to Netanyahu's words. It's true, the Iranian bomb is his mission of his lifetime, and this very much is a speech of his lifetime. He has put a lot of effort into it, and if it's, you know, after all of this controversy, one would hope it would at least be an exquisite speech. But at the same time, Netanyahu is very well looking back at the polls today. A new poll, the latest polls that were published today, show that the Zionist Union, his main political rivals, have quite a clear lead over him. So that is also something that is definitely in his mind while he addresses Congress.
And before we sat down, you mentioned there was another poll that came out today about this nuclear deal with Iran.
Well, there is a poll that was published just a short while ago by Maryland University in the United States saying that 61% of the Americans do support a deal with Iran. But as Dr. Friedman did point out, it depends which deal. I mean, even if you ask in Israel, maybe people will support a deal. The question is what kind of deal, what are the details of the deal? And Netanyahu and all of the Israeli establishment does feel, it's not only Netanyahu, many Israeli officials in the security and diplomatic establishment do feel that the deal that is emerging now between 6 world powers and Iran is a bad deal, is one that does not ensure Israel's security, and one that can help Iran turn into a nuclear threshold state.
And that word, bad, a bad deal, there's probably a difference between what Israel views as a bad deal, which we could say is any deal, to what the U.S. views as a bad deal. So what are those main differences between the two countries and how they view this term bad?
The difference comes down to this. Essentially, the current U.S. administration is trying to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear bomb. And the consensus here in Israel is that we're against any Iranian capability to produce a bomb. And so the difference is this deal that the U.S. appears to be negotiating will leave Iran with the capability of producing nuclear weapons at some point in the future, should it choose to do so.
But these are all leaks that we've been hearing over time. So what should we believe that is actually going on behind closed doors in these meetings?
Well, look, there are things clearly still up for negotiation, so we don't know the exact details. But the fact that Iran will be left with certainly thousands of centrifuges spinning, and the fact that there won't be clear transparency about the other elements of the nuclear program, the fact that inspections won't be taking place at Iranian military sites, the fact that ballistic missiles, which are almost used exclusively to deliver nuclear payloads, won't be regulated by this deal. These are all very problematic aspects. The fact that Iran's past research and development on weaponization won't be revealed is also a really problematic aspect of this deal. All of these things are going to be left to the side, it looks like.
And this deal doesn't have a deadline until the end of March. And we already mentioned U.S. Secretary of State not only isn't attending this speech, but he's actually meeting with Mohammad Javad Zarif in Switzerland to continue these negotiations.
That is one of the dangers of Netanyahu's speech, because it could create a counter effect. The fact that Netanyahu will be pleading to Congress to impose more sanctions now and to move forward with more sanctions could actually put more pressure on the negotiators to reach a deal. And definitely both of them, you can hear both the Iranians and the U.S. trying to maintain a sight of progress in talks and to continue until the last minute with the deadline. But again, we hear American officials still saying that the chances of a deal are a 50-50. It's a very complicated deal. Even if there are agreements on some components, it does not mean that a whole deal will be reached by the end of March.
And our correspondent Eli Ochenberg is standing by in Washington ahead of the speech. This is what she has to say.
Well, Marav, this is it. In a short while from now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will finally carry out his much-anticipated speech right here at the U.S. Congress. But what was supposed to be a very aggressive statement, including revealing inside information from the Iranian nuclear talk, seems to be getting much more moderate following the lashing out of U.S. President Barack Obama last night and the request of Democratic Party members from Netanyahu himself to keep it calm and not cause any further tensions between the U.S. administration and the Israeli government. So it will be very interesting to see how will Netanyahu balance between his attempts to receive the support of Congress members against the Iranian deal taking shape these days, and his will not to cause any further tensions with the U.S. administration. We will, of course, keep you updated throughout this day right here at the Capitol Hill.
And Ellie used this word balance. How does one find the balance between upsetting Democrats or upsetting the Republicans who invited him and wanted him to put on a show?
I don't think there's any chance of balance at this point. I do think there has been a lot of damage made. It is repairable. We do see an attempt by both the administration and Israel to try and say that this is a personal dispute and this does not affect the relationship. But it's very hard to impose any kind of show of balance now, or at least to convince with a show of balance after all we've been through in the past few weeks.
I think he wants to make his case.
And then can he find a balance with making his case? We've heard him say the same branch of the same poisonous tree. So many times we've heard the same remarks from him, and it's always come out as that.
You can't do two things at once with this speech. Either he's going to make his case, and then he'll worry about repairing the rift between Democrats and Republicans in support of Israel, or he won't. And so it seems to me he's already decided he's coming to make his case. That's what he's going to do. He'll worry about the rest afterwards.
And before getting on the plane, he dubbed this an historic mission. Is this one of those speeches that in 50 years we're going to look back on it and say, when Netanyahu went to Congress, this is where I was. I remember it.
Well, you know, Netanyahu hopes and wants to be in the shadow of Winston Churchill, one of the most glorified statesmen in history, and he does know a lot about Churchill. He might even quote him, and he will be receiving a gift from the
John
Speaker.
Boehner already gave him a bust of Churchill, which he knows is one of his favorite all-time politicians and diplomats.
Definitely, and Netanyahu does have these outstanding rhetoric skills. This could be very well one of the most notable speeches in history.
Because they are calling Netanyahu up to stage for his speech.
Senator from Wyoming, Mr. Barrasso. The Senator from Mississippi, Mr. Wicker. The Senator from Tennessee, Mr. Corker. The Senator from Illinois, Mr. Durbin. The Senator from New York, Mr. Schumer. The Senator from New Jersey, Mr. Menendez. And the Senator from Maryland, Mr. Cardin.
The members of the Escort Committee will exit the chamber through the lobby doors. Mr. Speaker, the Acting Dean of the Diplomatic Corps.
And we are waiting for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to take the stage for his much-anticipated congressional address. We're thinking it'd probably take around 45 minutes. He likes to make these addresses very long because he said to make his statement. But specifically, what reactions have we heard from Iran about these talks and about this speech that he's making?
Well, it was interesting this morning, the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, had a series of tweets that he sent out that were, how should we say it, not quite so friendly towards Israel and the
I actually have a couple of the examples of them. His Twitter feed said Zionist hegemony over U.S. officials is such that these poor people have to show consideration for Israel and cover up its crimes, and hashtag shut down AIPAC. So he was handing Netanyahu on a silver platter some material to use today.
Yeah, in some ways yes, in some ways no. I think, you know, what he's trying to draw attention to is the fact is sort of his worldview that Israel or AIPAC possess an outsized influence over American politics, and it's, you know, borderline conspiratorial, you know, the way he perceives the Israeli-American relationship, and, you know, this is an opportunity for him for sure.
And is Netanyahu with the speech affecting American politics?
Well, Netanyahu with the speech has become, you know, a part of American politics, I think, in many ways. This is not the only battle that Speaker Boehner and the Republican Party are now currently holding against the administration. There are a lot of other battles, but this has probably been the most prominent one in recent weeks. And Netanyahu, many in the United States do feel that there is an irreversible damage to the bipartisan notion of the relationship and of the alliance between Israel and the U.S. Netanyahu's connection with the Republican Party, and primarily with Sheldon Adelson, is problematic from the White House point of view. It has been problematic. It will continue to be problematic. And the only thing we have to wait and see is how exactly will the two sides try and repair this rift after the elections. We still have, after the speech, or after the elections.
It could be somebody else repairing the damage.
Definitely. But we still have another year and a half with Obama at the head of the administration. And from Israel's point of view, it is definitely an urgent task to try and at least bring down the flames and bring back things to normal. You know, regarding what Dr. Friedman said earlier today, from the Iranian point of view, a rift between Israel and U.S. is the perfect prize. This is exactly everything they could wish for. So Israel if it wants to protect its interests, has to very quickly and very swiftly try and repair this, at least the image.
But also from the Iranian point of view, it may look like a bad thing that Congress is supporting Benjamin Netanyahu, and Congress is now pushing to have more say in this nuclear deal.
Well, I think, unfortunately, it is giving the Iranian negotiating team a bit of leverage, because what they're going to argue is, look, how do we know that this deal doesn't expire at the end of the Obama administration? You know, that the next president who succeeds Obama won't walk back this deal. And so if you're not going to remove sanctions, meaning if the Obama administration simply places waivers on sanctions and the architecture remains in place, the Iranians are saying in negotiations, hey, look, how do we know that this is going to stick? And so, unfortunately, this dynamic, this sense that there is a gap between Israel and the U.S. on these issues, allows Zarif and Rouhani to deftly play that little tool.
And there is a clash of interest between Israel and U.S. on this issue. Yeah. Obama wants to have an agreement. Netanyahu wants to sabotage that agreement. This is the whole essence of this speech. So this clash of interest, I think we've never seen it so much before. And we do speak to Israeli officials, senior Israeli officials. They are concerned, very much concerned from the deal emerging. This is not Netanyahu's sole mission. He is not alone on this. He is very much backed by many in the Israeli Israeli establishment. The only question is about the way and the method he tried to address this clash of interests. Many are doubting that the speech to Congress was the right way. Netanyahu says the White House wasn't listening. Congress was my last resort.
I think it's important to point out, too, that the consensus here in Israel is that, we're not against any deal. And the fact that the Prime Minister is objecting to the outlines of the current deal doesn't mean that we, Israel, want war with Iran. And I think that is almost the way it's being portrayed in some circles in the U.S., is that Israel is presenting the U.S. with a choice, either a deal or war. And that's a false way of framing this issue. We want a strong deal here in Israel.
And it's an us or them type of ballot, but Israel isn't the only country in the Middle East that doesn't want to see a nuclear-armed Iran. But the other countries haven't been as vocal. How does the rest of the Middle East look at this speech and at this deal being made?
Well, it was interesting. A former Obama advisor, if you will, Bruce Riedel, who's at the Brookings Institution, recently published a short piece saying that the Saudis are playing a more subtle game than Israel. And the Saudis invited Nawaz Sharif, the head of government in Pakistan, to visit them this week, subtly sending the message to Iran and others that, hey, look, if Iran is going to be allowed a nuclear capability, then the Saudis are going to maybe suggest that, hey, look, we're also going to have that kind of thing.
Is that a better road towards it? And actually, we're going to be going live to Washington. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is walking into the chambers at the moment. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is walking into the chambers ahead of his speech to Congress, obviously getting a standing ovation. He's very much admired by those who are attending his speech. Of course, about 50 or so Democrats are boycotting the address to Congress over the dispute and the much controversial address that he is making ahead of the nuclear talks. The deadline is, of course, at the end of March, and Netanyahu is here to make his statement that we've been waiting for approximately maybe a month and a half, even 2 months. And it has caused further rifts between the U.S. and Israeli relations, something that we saw many diplomats talk about yesterday during the AIPAC conference, saying the relationship is still alive and well. We will have to wait for this address to see what he says and what may come out of it with this U.S.-Israeli relationship. And Tal, this isn't the first time that Prime Minister Netanyahu will be addressing the U.S. Congress.
Well, he's actually breaking, or at least making up to the record set by his admirable Winston Churchill, who we talked about earlier today. Netanyahu, this is his third time that he will be addressing Congress, and only Winston Churchill is the only other foreign leader who got to do that in 3 other instances. It's always been a very warm crowd for Netanyahu. The Congress does love Netanyahu. It's not only the Republicans. It's true, the exact number we just see on Twitter is 57 Democratic senators are boycotting or banning the speech, but at the same time, there are a lot of people there who it is important to them to show support for Netanyahu and to show Netanyahu that he is not being boycotted by the American Congress.
But again, some of the leadership of the United States will not be attending. There will be an empty seat behind Prime Minister Netanyahu, where Joe Biden usually sits because he is out of the country.
No representation from the administration. No administration official will be at the speech. They were also instructed not to have any official contacts with anyone from Netanyahu's entourage during the visit.
And it seems as if Prime Minister Netanyahu is about to start his speech, so we'll be going live to Washington.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the Prime Minister of Israel, His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu.
Thank you. Thank you. Speaker of the House, John Boehner, President Pro Tem, Senator Orrin Hatch, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, and House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy. I also want to acknowledge Senator Democratic Leader Harry Reid. Harry, it's good to see you back on your feet. I guess it's true what they say, you can't keep a good man down. My friends, I'm deeply humbled by the opportunity to speak for a third time before the most important legislative body in the world, the U.S. Congress. I want to thank you all for being here today. I know that my speech has been the subject of much controversy. I deeply regret that some perceive my being here as political. That was never my intention. I want to thank you, Democrats and Republicans, for your common support for Israel, year after year, decade after decade. I know that no matter on which side of the aisle you sit, you stand with Israel. The remarkable alliance between Israel and the United States has always been above politics. It must always remain above politics. Because America and Israel, we share a common destiny, the destiny of promised lands that cherish freedom and offer hope. Israel is grateful for the support of America's people and of America's presidents, from Harry Truman to Barack Obama. We appreciate all that President Obama has done for Israel. Now, some of that is widely known. Some of that is widely known, like strengthening security cooperation and intelligence sharing, opposing anti-Israel resolutions at the UN. Some of what the President has done for Israel is less well known. I called him in 2010 when we had the Carmel forest fire, and he immediately agreed to respond to my request for urgent aid. In 2011, we had our embassy in Cairo under siege, and again, he provided vital assistance at the crucial moment. Or his support for more missile interceptors during our operation when we took on Hamas terrorists. In each of those moments, I called the president, and he was there. And some of what the president has done for Israel might never be known because it touches on some of the most sensitive and strategic issues that arise between an American president and an Israeli prime minister. But I know it, and I will always be grateful to President Obama for that support. And Israel is grateful to you, the American Congress, for your support, for supporting us in so many ways, especially in generous military assistance and missile defense, including Iron Dome. Last summer, millions of Israelis were protected from thousands of Hamas rockets because this Capitol Dome helped build our Iron Dome. Thank you, America. Thank you for everything you've done for Israel. My friends, I've come here today because as Prime Minister of Israel, I feel a profound obligation to speak to you about an issue that could well threaten the survival of my country and the future of my people: Iran's quest for nuclear weapons. We're an ancient people. In our nearly 4,000 years of history, many have tried repeatedly to destroy the Jewish people. Tomorrow night, on the Jewish holiday of Purim, we'll read the book of Esther. We'll read of a powerful Persian viceroy named Aman, who plotted to destroy the Jewish people some 2,500 years ago. But a courageous Jewish woman, Queen Esther, exposed the plot and gained for the Jewish people the right to defend themselves against their enemies. The plot was foiled. Our people were saved. Today, the Jewish people face another attempt by yet another Persian potentate to destroy us. Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, spews the oldest hatred of anti-Semitism with the newest technology. He tweets that Israel must be annihilated. He tweets. You know, in Iran, there isn't exactly free internet. But he tweets in English that Israel must be destroyed. For those who believe that Iran threatens the Jewish state, but not the Jewish people, listen to Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, Iran's chief terrorist proxy. He said, "If all the Jews gather in Israel, it will save us the trouble of chasing them down around the world." But Iran's regime is not merely a Jewish problem, any more than the Nazi regime was merely a Jewish problem. The 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis were but a fraction of the 60 million people killed in World War II. So too, Iran's regime poses a grave threat not only to Israel, but also to the peace of the entire world. To understand just how dangerous Iran would be with nuclear weapons, we must fully understand the nature of the regime. The people of Iran are a very talented people. They're heirs to one of the world's great civilizations. But in 1979, they were hijacked by religious zealots who imposed on them immediately a dark and brutal dictatorship. That year, the Zealots drafted a constitution, a new one for Iran. It directed the Revolutionary Guards not only to protect Iran's borders, but also to fulfill the ideological mission of jihad. The regime's founder, Ayatollah Khomeini, exhorted his followers to export the revolution throughout the world. I'm standing here in Washington, D.C., and the difference is so stark. America's founding document promises life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Iran's founding document pledges death, tyranny, and the pursuit of jihad. And as states are collapsing across the Middle East, Iran is charging into the void to do just that. Iran's goons in Gaza, its lackeys in Lebanon, its Revolutionary Guards on the Golan Heights are clutching Israel with three tentacles of terror. Backed by Iran, Assad is slaughtering Syrians. Backed by Iran, Shiite militias are rampaging through Iraq. Backed by Iran, Houthis are seizing control of Yemen, threatening the strategic straits at the mouth of the Red Sea. Along with the Straits of Hormuz, that would give Iran a second choke point on the world's oil supply. Just last week, near Hormuz, Iran carried out a military exercise blowing up a mock U.S. aircraft carrier. That's just last week, while they're having nuclear talks with the United States. But unfortunately, for the last 36 years, Iran's attacks against the United States have been anything but mock, and the targets have been all too real. Iran took dozens of Americans hostage in Tehran, murdered hundreds of American soldiers, Marines in Beirut, and was responsible for killing and maiming thousands of American servicemen and women in Iraq and Afghanistan. Beyond the Middle East, Iran attacks America and its allies through its global terror network. It blew up the Jewish Community Center and the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires. It helped al-Qaeda bomb U.S. embassies in Africa. It even attempted to assassinate the Saudi ambassador right here in Washington, D.C. In the Middle East, Iran now dominates 4 Arab capitals: Baghdad, Damascus, Beirut, and Sana'a. And if Iran's aggression is left unchecked, more will surely follow. So at a time when many hope that Iran will join the community of nations, Iran is busy gobbling up the nations. We must all stand together to stop Iran's march of conquest, subjugation, and terror. Now, 2 years ago, we were told to give President Rouhani and Foreign Minister Zarif a chance to bring change and moderation to Iran. Some change, some moderation. Rouhani's government hangs gays, persecutes Christians, jails journalists, and executes even more prisoners than before. Last year, the same Zarif, who charms Western diplomats, laid a wreath at the grave of Imad Murnia. Imad Murnia is the terrorist mastermind who spilled more American blood than any other terrorist besides Osama bin Laden. I'd like to see someone ask him a question about that. Iran's regime is as radical as ever. Its cries of death to America, that same America that it calls the Great Satan, as loud as ever. Now, this shouldn't be surprising, because the ideology of Iran's revolutionary regime is deeply rooted in militant Islam. And that's why this regime will always be an enemy of America. And don't be fooled. The battle between Iran and ISIS doesn't turn Iran into a friend of America. Iran and ISIS are competing for the crown of militant Islam. One calls itself the Islamic Republic, the other calls itself the Islamic State. Both want to impose a militant Islamic empire, first on the region and then on the entire world. They just disagree among themselves who will be the ruler of that empire. In this deadly game of thrones, there's no place for America or for Israel. No peace for Christians, Jews, or Muslims who don't share the Islamist medieval creed. No rights for women, no freedom for anyone. So when it comes to Iran and ISIS, the enemy of your enemy is your enemy. The difference is that ISIS is armed with butcher knives, captured weapons, and YouTube, whereas Iran could soon be armed with intercontinental ballistic missiles and nuclear bombs. We must always remember, I'll say it one more time, the greatest danger facing our world is the marriage of militant Islam with nuclear weapons. To defeat ISIS and let Iran get nuclear weapons would be to win the battle but lose the war. We can't let that happen. But that, my friends, is exactly what could happen if the deal now being negotiated is accepted by Iran. That deal will not prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. It would all but guarantee that Iran gets those weapons, lots of them. Let me explain why. While the final deal has not yet been signed, certain elements of any potential deal are now a matter of public record. You don't need intelligence agencies and secret information to know this. You can Google it. Absent a dramatic change, we know for sure that any deal with Iran will include two major concessions to Iran. The first major concession would leave Iran with a vast nuclear infrastructure, providing it with a short breakout time to the bomb. Breakout time is the time it takes to amass enough weapons-grade uranium or plutonium for a nuclear bomb. According to the deal, not a single nuclear facility would be demolished. Thousands of centrifuges used to enrich uranium would be left spinning. Thousands more would be temporarily disconnected, but not destroyed. Because Iran's nuclear program would be left largely intact, Iran's breakout time would be very short, about a year by U.S. assessment, even shorter by Israel. And if Iran's work on advanced centrifuges, faster and faster centrifuges, is not stopped, that breakout time could still be shorter, a lot shorter. True, certain restrictions would be imposed on Iran's nuclear program, and Iran's adherence to those restrictions would be supervised by international inspectors. But here's the problem. You see, inspectors document violations. They don't stop them. Inspectors knew when North Korea broke to the bomb, but that didn't stop anything. North Korea turned off the cameras, kicked out the inspectors. Within a few years, it got the bomb. Now we're warned that within 5 years, North Korea could have an arsenal of 100 nuclear bombs. Like North Korea, Iran too has defied international inspectors. It's done that on at least 3 separate occasions: 2005, 2006, 2010. Like North Korea, Iran broke the locks, shut off the cameras. Now, I know this is not going to come as a shock to any of you, but Iran not only defies inspectors, it also plays a pretty good game of hide and cheat with them. The UN's nuclear watchdog agency, the IAEA, said again yesterday that Iran still refuses to come clean about its military nuclear program. Iran was also caught twice, not once, twice, operating secret nuclear facilities in Natanz and Qom, facilities that inspectors didn't even know existed. Right now, Iran could be hiding nuclear facilities that we don't know about, the U.S. and Israel. As the former head of inspections for the IAEA said in 2013, he said, if there's no undeclared installation today in Iran, it'll be the first time in 20 years that it doesn't have one. Iran has proven time and again that it cannot be trusted. And that's why the first major concession is a source of grave concern. It leaves Iran with a vast nuclear infrastructure and relies on inspectors to prevent a breakout. That concession creates a real danger that Iran could get to the bomb by violating the deal. But the second major concession creates an even greater danger, that Iran could get to the bomb by keeping the deal. Because virtually all the restrictions on Iran's nuclear program will automatically expire in about a decade. Now, a decade may seem like a long time in political life, but it's the blink of an eye in the life of a nation. It's a blink of an eye in the life of our children. We all have a responsibility to consider what will happen when Iran's nuclear capabilities are virtually unrestricted and all the sanctions will have been lifted. Iran would then be free to build a huge nuclear capacity that could produce many, many nuclear bombs. Iran's supreme leader says that openly. He says Iran plans to have 190,000 centrifuges, not 6,000 or even the 19,000 that Iran has today, but 10 times that amount. 190,000 centrifuges enriching uranium. With this massive capacity, Iran could make the fuel for an entire nuclear arsenal, and this in a matter of weeks, once it makes that decision. My longtime friend, John Kerry, Secretary of State, confirmed last week that Iran could legitimately possess that massive centrifuge capacity when the deal expires. Now, I want you to think about that. The foremost sponsor of global terrorism could be weeks away from having enough enriched uranium for an entire arsenal of nuclear weapons, and this with full international legitimacy. And by the way, if Iran's intercontinental ballistic missile program is not part of the deal, and so far, Iran refuses to even put it on the negotiating table, while Iran could have the means to deliver that nuclear arsenal to the far-reach corners of the earth, including to every part of the United States. So you see, my friends, this deal has two major concessions. One, leaving Iran with a vast nuclear program. And two, lifting the restrictions on that program in about a decade. That's why this deal is so bad. It doesn't block Iran's path to the bomb. It paves Iran's path to the bomb. So why would anyone make this deal? Because they hope that Iran will change for the better in the coming years? Or they believe that the alternative to this deal is worse? Well, I disagree. I don't believe that Iran's radical regime will change for the better after this deal. This regime has been in power for 36 years, and its voracious appetite for aggression grows with each passing year. This deal would only whet Iran's appetite for more. Would Iran be less aggressive when sanctions are removed and its economy is stronger? If Iran is gobbling up 4 countries right now while it's under sanctions, how many more countries will Iran devour when sanctions are lifted? Would Iran fund less terrorism when it has mountains of cash with which to fund more terrorism? Why should Iran's radical regime change for the better when it can enjoy the best of both worlds, aggression abroad, prosperity at home? This is a question that everyone asks in our region. Israel's neighbors, Iran's neighbors, know that Iran will become even more aggressive and sponsor even more terrorism when its economy is unshackled and it's been given a clear path to the bomb. And many of these neighbors say they'll respond by racing to get nuclear weapons of their own. So this deal won't change Iran for the better. It will only change the Middle East for the worse. A deal that's supposed to prevent nuclear proliferation would instead spark a nuclear arms race in the most dangerous part of the planet. This deal won't be a farewell to arms. It would be a farewell to arms control. And the Middle East would soon be crisscrossed by nuclear tripwires. A region where small skirmishes can trigger big wars would turn into a nuclear tinderbox. If anyone thinks this deal kicks the can down the road, think again. When we get down that road, we'll face a much more dangerous Iran, a Middle East littered with nuclear bombs, and a countdown to a potential nuclear nightmare. Ladies and gentlemen, I've come here today to tell you we don't have to bet the security of the world on the hope that Iran will change for the better. We don't have to gamble with our future and with our children's future. We can insist that restrictions on Iran's nuclear program not be lifted for as long as Iran continues its aggression in the region and in the world. Before lifting those restrictions, the world should demand that Iran do three things. First, stop its aggression against its neighbors in the Middle East. Second, stop supporting terrorism around the world. And third, stop threatening to annihilate my country, Israel, the one and only Jewish state. If the world powers are not prepared to insist that Iran change its behavior before a deal is signed, at the very least, they should insist that Iran change its behavior before a deal expires. If Iran changes its behavior, the restrictions would be lifted. If Iran doesn't change its behavior, the restrictions should not be lifted. If Iran wants to be treated like a normal country, let it act like a normal country. My friends, what about the argument that there is no alternative to this deal? That Iran's nuclear know-how cannot be erased, that its nuclear program is so advanced that the best we can do is delay the inevitable, which is essentially what the proposed deal seeks to do. Well, nuclear know-how without nuclear infrastructure doesn't get you very much. A race car driver without a car can't drive. A pilot without a plane can't fly. Without thousands of centrifuges, tons of enriched uranium, or heavy water facilities, Iran can't make nuclear weapons. Iran's nuclear program can be rolled back well beyond the current proposal by insisting on a better deal and keeping up the pressure on a very vulnerable regime, especially given the recent collapse in the price of oil. Now, if Iran threatens to walk away from the table, and this often happens in a Persian bazaar, call their bluff. They'll be back because they need the deal a lot more than you do. And by maintaining the pressure on Iran and on those who do business with Iran, you have the power to make them need it even more. My friends, for over a year, we've been told that no deal is better than a bad deal. Well, this is a bad deal. It's a very bad deal. We're better off without it. Now we're being told that the only alternative to this bad deal is war. That's just not true. The alternative to this bad deal is a much better deal. A better deal that doesn't leave Iran with a vast nuclear infrastructure and such a short breakout time. A better deal that keeps the restrictions on Iran's nuclear program in place until Iran's aggression ends. A better deal that won't give Iran an easy path to the bomb. A better deal that Israel and its neighbors may not like, but with which we could live, literally. And no country has a greater stake. No country has a greater stake than Israel in a good deal that peacefully removes this threat. Ladies and gentlemen, history has placed us at a fateful crossroads. We must now choose between two paths. One path leads to a bad deal that will at best curtail Iran's nuclear ambitions for a while, but it will inexorably lead to a nuclear-armed Iran whose unbridled aggression will inevitably lead to war. The second path, however difficult, could lead to a much better deal that would prevent a nuclear-armed Iran, a nuclearized Middle East, and the horrific consequences of both to all of humanity. You don't have to read Robert Frost to know. You have to live life to know that the difficult path is usually the one less traveled. But it will make all the difference for the future of my country, the security of the Middle East, and the peace of the world, the peace we all desire. My friends, standing up to Iran is not easy. Standing up to dark and murderous regimes never is. With us today is Holocaust survivor and Nobel Prize winner, Elie Wiesel. Elie, your life and work inspire us to give meaning to the words, never again. And I wish I could promise you, Elie, that the lessons of history have been learned. I can only urge the leaders of the world not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Not to sacrifice the future for the present, not to ignore aggression in the hopes of gaining an illusory peace. But I can guarantee you this. The days when the Jewish people remain passive in the face of genocidal enemies, those days are over. We are no longer scattered among the nations, powerless to defend ourselves. We've restored our sovereignty in our ancient home, and the soldiers who defend our home have boundless courage. For the first time in 100 generations, we, the Jewish people, can defend ourselves. This is why, as Prime Minister of Israel, I can promise you one more thing. Even if Israel has to stand alone, Israel will stand. But I know that Israel does not stand alone. I know that America stands with Israel. I know that you stand with Israel. You stand with Israel because you know that the story of Israel is not only the story of the Jewish people, but of the human spirit that refuses again and again to succumb to history's horrors. Facing me, right up there in the gallery, overlooking all of us in this august chamber, is the image of Moses. Moses led our people from slavery to the gates of the Promised Land. And before the people of Israel entered the land of Israel, Moses gave us a message that has steeled our resolve for thousands of years. I leave you with his message today. חזקו ואמצו, אל תיראו ואל תערצו מפניהם. Be strong and resolute, neither fear nor dread them. My friends, may Israel and America always stand together, strong and resolute. May we neither fear nor dread the challenges ahead. May we face the future with confidence, strength, and hope. May God bless the state of Israel, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all. You're wonderful. Thank you, America. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And welcome back inside the I-24 News studios. We were just listening to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu address Congress about the Iranian nuclear negotiations. With me are Iranian politics expert Meir Javandan, I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev, and Brennan Friedman of Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University. And gentlemen, I apologize, but ladies first. Tal, what were your initial reactions to the speech?
Well, as we expected, it was a great speech. Netanyahu used almost all of the rhetoric skills he has in his book, except props. He did not present a prop, but he did talk about Khamenei on Twitter. He talked about Queen Esther and the Jewish Purim holiday. He talked about Game of Thrones. He paralleled Iran to the Nazi regime. He mentioned the Holocaust. He pointed out Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Prize laureate and a Holocaust survivor. And he definitely spoke American, as he